Okay, now let's move on to the poem Beowulf. Now, the Beowulf is one of the oldest poems in English literature. Why is it important? It's important because it's amazing writing, great story. You would love the story. It's brilliantly written, brilliantly narrated as well. Of course, we do not know who wrote the poem. Like all the oral songs or poems that come to us, we don't know who first wrote it, because it was passed on from one generation to the other. However, the poem was written down much later in the 11th century. Again, we do not know who actually wrote this poem. The manuscript that we have dates to about the 11th century AD, when we had a couple of Christian monks who wrote down the poem, and that is what brings in the Christian elements in the poem as well. The poem first appeared at about 700 to 800 AD. However, it was set much before that. It was set in 500 AD. That was the time when the Anglo-Saxons or the Scandinavian tribes, the Germanic tribes, moved into England. It is interesting how the manuscript ended up with us. It first appeared in the private library of one Robert Cotton, and unfortunately there was sort of an accident that happened in 1731. There was a fire in the library. Most of the manuscripts were burned down, all including Beowulf. Fortunately enough, only a little bit of the manuscript was burned down. We do have quite a lot of it today, and we can see that in the British Museum. Alright, so the poem talks about the hero Beowulf, who is a warrior. Okay, now like I said, there were quite a few traits that are really important for the Anglo-Saxon society. Now, some of the traits that can be seen in the poem itself are courage, bravery, strength, loyalty, obedience to one's lord, generosity, willingness to engage in a battle, very importantly, and quest for fame. Another fact that I mentioned earlier was that it is an aristocratic poem, which talks about generally the upper classes. We would see that in English literature, not a lot of works were written about the middle classes or the lower classes, until of course Geoffrey Chaucer came in with his Canterbury Tales and other works. Now, the poem is divided into three parts. In the first part, we have Beowulf, who's fighting a monster called Grendel. This monster was creating quite a bit of ruckus in the land of the Danes. In the second part, we have Grendel's mother attacking Beowulf to seek revenge for the killing of her son. In the third part, Beowulf is a very old man, goes out to rescue a dragon, is successful as well. Unfortunately, he receives some mortal wounds, and that causes his end. The poem itself talks about these various fights that he had, the wars that he fought, in great detail, basically talking about discussing his bravery, his valor, and all of that. The poem also talks about Beowulf's funeral, which is an elaborate sort of an event. When you read this poem, you also think about Homer's work, a lot of these the Greek works. Now basically what we need to keep in mind is that the society was a warrior society, which meant it placed great importance on the war, placed a lot of importance on how you conduct yourself in the battlefield. Now, the social life that is described in the poem is essentially primitive. They fight with valor, they eat and drink well, and there's description of their court, which is called the Mead Hall, where a lot of warriors, the king and the warriors, technically live. It's a detailed poem. In fact, it talks about everything about the society, the social life of the time.